muchas comunidades que ya han logrado organizarse y hacer el trabajo social, que es lo más importante.
La comunicación alternativa y popular en el mundo no ha logrado construir una experiencia como la que hoy tiene Telesur.
En Venezuela nuestra pigmentación de afrodescendientes nos identifica. Somos sabor, olor, color y somos la ternura del cacao en Venezuela, el mejor del mundo.
Pero lo que exigimos nosotros es que esas 6.000 familias se reconozcan en la constituyente.
Somos mujeres, somos iguales y que debemos de apoyarnos unas con otras.
Bolívar visitó, viajó, todo para dar la revolución en aquellos años. Entonces creo que con la revolución de Chávez, que volvió a revivir el bolivarianismo, es bueno todas las experiencias de ustedes, que son gente luchadora de los pueblos, que creo que están en la misma tarea de nosotros en contra del imperialismo, que es nuestro mayor enemigo, y es donde nosotros estamos dando la lucha.
Un solo corazón, Venezuela.
I felt very confused about who to believe or what to believe, I should say. I'm hearing that, you know, the president is a dictator, that the people, like the Chavistas, aren't happy with the president, and hearing that, you know, just people are suffering, seeing, you know, the long lines and seeing, you know, or hearing about people starving, so wanting to go and actually see for myself what is actually going on.
It seems that a major part of the war, the United States war against Venezuela, is an information war, and that's how the American people have been kind of neutralized, in a sense, the anti-war sentiment in the American people. I think the main message is, first of all, that people are starving and people are living with such tremendous deprivation as a result of mismanagement of the economy and corruption, that people are doing things that are not really conceivable or that I've been able to verify.
I wanted to come back at this time because Venezuela is now in the crosshairs of the U.S. They've mobilized other nations and put out they've done their game plan, which they've done in other places, which is the disinformation campaign, the destabilization campaign, all the ways that they're trying to undermine the revolution here. Having read various things, both not only in the corporate press, which I expect to be spreading a lot of disinformation, but even among the left, I was expecting actually to see potentially the demobilization of a lot of that popular energy. And what has been so wonderful about this trip is all of the people, in so many different ways, in so many different places, people's spirit and engagement in the revolutionary process, that there are many, many people who are still strongly engaged and still strongly building the Bolivarian project. And that's not to paper over contradictions or problems or real challenges that exist, but that's the work, that's the revolutionary process. And as much as we might like that to be pure and quick, what we're seeing is, you know, here on this trip is just people engaging in the hard work and figuring out together how to move forward in the face of enormous challenges.
¿Qué decimos nosotros? Con ese Estado podemos aliarnos. Aliarnos, es decir, pero no es que tú vas a tutorial, no queremos que nos tutoreen. Tú no puedes decir nosotros qué es lo que vamos a hacer.
Since I've been here, I've been able to, we've been to a number of different communities where people are organized around in support of the government, not necessarily believing that Maduro has been perfect, you know, definitely heard criticisms and the contradictions that exist in the current government, but largely people seem to feel that the people need to be governing themselves in this country, and that Maduro was the elected representative, and so people are, it seems to be in support of that. And learning that the violence that we were seeing on TV and in the media has been caused primarily by the opposition, who are made up of elite in Venezuela who want to maintain capitalism and are cooperating with the United States government with the strong military backing to make that a reality. And so, you know, they've been terrorizing their own communities in fact not really protesting, mostly terrorizing their own communities and shutting things down and creating a crisis situation where there really shouldn't be a crisis situation.
Porque la comuna es una organización política territorial.
I really don't know a lot about how the communes, particularly in Venezuela, what their origins were and how they actually came to be and then do the day-to-day work and what the vision is for the future, or what maybe the ideation or the imaginary, as is a word I've heard used here a lot, might be. And so to get to listen to some of that, to some of the contradictions, some of the struggles, the successes, and also just like the pride and like the power is it's phenomenal. So I've had the opportunity, not so much again in terms of the misconceptions, but to really fill some gaps. I know, for example, having lived and worked in the US for so very long, our advocacy, a lot of the advocacy and activist movements with which I am familiar, we may talk the language of there needs to be social change and revolution and a change in heart and consciousness. I am not always convinced that we know the need, but we haven't yet figured out what the possibility could be, much less how to go about getting there. It is a radical, extraordinary process, and so to come to a place where a lot of the public has shared that same ideation of there needs to be change, there needs to be a change of heart, there needs to be a change in our quality of life, just everything, and then to like say we are going to radically transform our nation and our community and then do so is unprecedented, at least in my lifetime. And so for me to be able to really witness and really engage with and really question in some ways, and so that's been extraordinary.
One of the most important points that stood out for me was just how, as a people, from young to old, everyone is so knowledgeable and the majority are very involved in terms of being proponents of this Bolivarian Revolution, a movement that, as I mentioned, seeks to give power back to the people. And the interesting part about it is that it's a very challenging road. I mean, yes, they've suffered for hundreds of years, decades, and even now with technology invading different spaces and other cultures. I mean, that's what the oligarchy, that's what the imperialists bring to a country to try to break you down. But the people in this phase of transition here in Venezuela are showing that they are not afraid of the challenge of taking back power with all the difficulties and challenges that entails. And it's a significant learning experience that we get to take back to our country. As I have been mentioning during this delegation, there seems to be a lack of consciousness on the part of a lot of Belizeans to not be involved in the process of democracy in our country, and the Venezuelan people certainly represent that at the very highest level.
Aquí en la comuna El Maizal tenemos varias empresas que se formó aquí, lo que es la bloquera, la empresa de gas, tenemos la de ganadería, siembra y mecanización. Ahorita tenemos la recién de porcino, con una empresa recuperada por la comuna El Maizal. Esa empresa estaba en total abandono. La comuna El Maizal hizo empoderamiento de esa empresa y ya actualmente está productiva totalmente. Incluso ya lo que se está sacando a la venta ya son los cochinos que se están produciendo allá.
The stories of worker takeovers of factories, I've never been able to witness and experience, and so those stories are just, they're mind-blowing for me, quite honestly. But also some of the things that stick are like really small passing comments. We were going through a plantain factory. They produce a number of different products using plantain as the base, and they were walking us through the line of the factory, right? So, you know, here cut the whole line in terms of production process. And at the very end there were 4, I think it was women, standing two on either side of like a processing belt, and they were putting the labels on the jars and then putting the jars in boxes, right? And the man asked us, he was like, you know, why do you think we don't really seek to acquire the labeling machine that goes ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta, right? Like 6 times faster than any human could, and do the boxing and the packaging for you as well? And he's like, because the process of mechanization creates unemployment, and that's not part of who we are or what we want to do. And that was extraordinarily powerful to me. I'm much more accustomed to prizing efficiency, prizing speed, prizing, you know, increasing numbers of production and that kind of thing. And yet I always questioned that. And so to see that it's okay to, not only is it okay to question it, but to prioritize the question and seek another answer was really extraordinary for me. You know, one of the experiences that I had while I was here, I had no idea how many African people were in Venezuela, and how many people identify as African. So that has actually been a very pleasant surprise and experience that I've had. I went to an area called Barlovento, where huge African Venezuelan population, where I got to see how people are living, see how people are, you know, just very communal, very tied to their African roots, and it reminded me of being in the Bay Area even, and you know how we also try to really identify strongly and reclaim our African culture. So I felt a kinship with the people there. It's been a very beautiful experience that I can't even describe in this little bit of time.
It was very interesting meeting with the what we would class as the LGBT community, but that's because, you know, we're getting all these characterizations from the US, but the people here leading the gender movement here in Venezuela, being true to who they are challenging even those characterizations from outside. So they refuse to characterize themselves as LGBTQ, and finding or reaching at the point where they define themselves alone and not letting other people define them. So for me, that was very, very inspiring. And of course, going to the different communards, again, a different way of doing things, of allowing the people to choose their own destiny, you know, and again, it has represented great challenges, but they have decided that they are going to take those challenges head on, and I think that's the greatest piece of knowledge that I personally take away and that I admire completely about the Venezuelan people.
Se está organizando para asumir el poder. Imagínate el gran compromiso que la gente tiene, no solamente con empresas de la magnitud de esa, sino también en la manufactura, en la confección. Actualmente ahora estamos en época de vacaciones. Nuestras mujeres son las que están fabricando los uniformes, los corrales escolares. Las mujeres en las comunidades también son las que trabajan en los comedores ahora de las escuelas, las madres que procesan los alimentos para el programa de alimentación escolar.
Interested in me coming here as someone who's interested in like agriculture and the way agriculture has been used to exploit Latin America. I was really excited to learn about that, and coming here, being with the Movimiento Sin Tierra, seeing their project about sort of like recuperating native seeds, recuperating Venezuelan soil, going to see other agricultural communes that were again worker run, and focus on recuperating their land and transforming it into land that would produce for their communities. Like, that was so inspiring.
We have 6 hectares of corn, which is just
que se había perdido, y
se ha venido recuperando poco a poco con los compañeros.
It's my first time in a socialist country, and you can feel the difference, you can see the difference, you can hear the difference, and it's like the Zapatistas would say, you can imagine another world. There really is another way to live where the power is in the blood of the people. And so we will never, as an international delegation from Belize, the United States, Argentina, descendants of people from Chile, from the continent of Africa, we will never forget. We have taken a lot of pictures, we have documented video, audio, written information. So long after we're gone to the ancestral realm, our children and the children of our children will look at our images and remember the stories and know that a group of people, in spite of the fake news, in particular from Western media, from the imperialist United States of America, that there's another narrative, that people came